Hello, and welcome to another 5 Good Minutes, where I answer your theological questions in 5 minutes or less. Today's question is salvation monergistic or synergistic? First, let's define some words. Monergistic salvation. The word monergistic means mono, meaning one, or ergos, meaning work, is essentially one working. Essentially, it's the belief that God alone works in our salvation from beginning to end. Synergistic salvation, the prefix syn with ergos, work, means with working or working with, or it implies a cooperation in salvation, that God doesn't save alone or 100%, but that He needs our help or cooperation in order to seal the deal. I'm sure you're wondering, where do I land on this issue? And I believe, if you don't already know, that salvation is monergistic. Therefore, I'm on the side of Augustine and Calvin and Luther. I would reject the Pelagian, Erasmian, and Arminian teachings on this matter. You may be asking, why is this even a question, and why is there so much confusion or debate on this topic? Well, it comes down to the age-old debate of reconciling God's sovereignty in salvation and human responsibility. If salvation is 100% up to God, does that mean that man is not responsible then to believe? Of course not. God is sovereign, and man is responsible. Those two truths are not at odds with one another. They work in beautiful harmony. Where you land on this issue all depends on what you believe that man is able to morally and spiritually do for himself without the intervention of God. If you find that man is able to help himself at all, then you will say that salvation is synergistic. But what we see in the Bible is nothing of that sort at all. We see in the scriptures that man is totally depraved, morally bankrupt, dead in his sins, blind, and hostile to God. And yet, in spite of all that, God holds us responsible, even though we are commanded to do something we cannot do. Because no one is capable, no one is able to do anything, which is why it has to be 100% God. If God even left salvation 1% up to us, we would all go to hell. Paul says in Ephesians 1:4-5, even as He chose us in Him before the foundation of the world, that we should be holy and blameless before Him. In love He predestined us for adoption to Himself as sons, through Jesus Christ, according to the purpose of His will. He chose us, He predestined us, according to what? Based on what we would decide? No, according to what He decided, according to the purpose of His will. Paul says this as well in Romans chapter 9, verse 16. After making an argument of why God chose Jacob over Esau, he then comes to the conclusion saying what? It does not depend on human will or exertion, but on God who has mercy. Again, how could salvation be synergistic if Paul makes such a statement that it does not depend on human will? If it were up to you to cooperate with God, then that verse would not be in the Bible. And of course, this verse we all know very well. Paul says to the Ephesians in chapter 2, verses 8-9, for by grace you have been saved through faith. And this is not your own doing. It is the gift of God, not a result of works, so that no one may boast. Here again, we see Paul clearly say, how are we saved? By grace. See, grace is not just the opportunity to be saved. Grace is the power to be saved. And to make it very clear, Paul says that it is not of your own doing. What is not your own doing? The grace is not of your own doing. Neither is the faith to believe your own doing. It is all the gift of God. Not just grace is the gift of God, but faith is the gift of God. Salvation then is monergistic. There is one working in your salvation. The reason that anyone believes in Jesus Christ and is saved is because God the Father has chosen you before time began to be saved by God the Son, who died on the cross and rose again from the dead on the third day. And God the Spirit goes into the world through the preaching of the gospel, transforming your heart, opening you up, giving you the gift of faith so that when the gospel comes, you can see and believe. Not of your own doing, not your cooperation, but all of God, who chose you, who saved you, who even gave you the ability to believe. And this has been another 5 Good Minutes.